I, a young mother, found an elderly woman alone in the woods and helped her. In return, she gave me a strange bundle. When I opened it, I was stunned by what was inside. I carefully settled Elijah into the car seat. My eyes were fixed on his sleeping little face. "All right, my angel, it's time for daycare. Mommy has to go to work," I whispered to him, and my son smiled back at me. As I drove, my mind was consumed with thoughts about the daycare. How am I going to keep up with the payments? Managing the monthly bills was becoming increasingly difficult. I need a miracle, I thought. My gaze alternated between the road and the rearview mirror where Elijah slept peacefully. When we arrived at daycare, I carefully lifted Elijah from the car. I took great care not to wake him. "Be a good boy here. I'll be back soon." I gently kissed his forehead as I said that before handing him over to the warm hands of the caregiver. As I walked away, the image of Elijah waving goodbye tightened my chest. "This is all for you, my little angel. It has to be worth it." I whispered that, fighting to keep my emotions in check. Arriving at work, I prepared to fulfill my duties as a secretary for another day. My desk was neatly organized, reflecting my dedication to my job and my efforts to support Elijah. When Sean approached, the atmosphere at the office shifted. Respect and anticipation filled the air. "Good morning, Allison. Please check the presentation for today's meeting and confirm the 11 o'clock appointment with Mr. Miller." His voice was calm but firm, showing his trust in my abilities. I nodded and replied with a slight smile. "Of course, Sean. I'll get on it right away. Everything will be ready on time." My voice conveyed not just efficiency but a quiet determination driving me. After Sean left, I took a moment to reflect. He trusts me with my work. I have to uphold that trust. I can't let him down. With this thought in mind, I focused on my tasks for the day. The morning flew by with phone calls, email responses, and meeting preparations. I worked with almost mechanical precision, but my mind was preoccupied with Elijah and the growing stack of bills at home. Maybe I should ask for a raise. But as soon as that thought crossed my mind, anxiety followed swiftly. What if they think I don't deserve it? What if it jeopardizes my job? A whirlwind of thoughts created a heavy ball of anxiety in my chest. I struggled to push it aside. By the time the meeting arrived, I had everything in place. The presentation was reviewed, and the meeting room was ready. Sean glanced at me with a satisfied look before entering the room. It was a small gesture, but it filled me with pride and renewed energy. "I can do this," I told myself. For Elijah, I can face any challenge. As the day came to an end and I prepared to pick up Elijah, I reflected on the small victories and the ongoing challenges. One step at a time. I reminded myself, tidying up the paperwork and turning off the office lights. "Elijah, I'm doing this for you." And more. With renewed determination, I closed the door. I was ready for whatever fate had in store for me and my son.
Night was approaching. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, in a neighborhood lined with high-rises and luxurious mansions, Sean and his wife Elizabeth's lives were unfolding in stark contrast to Allison's. Sean was setting up dinner, and with a hint of hesitation, he said to Elizabeth, "Mom called today. She's coming over tonight to have dinner with us." He said this while watching her reaction closely. Elizabeth's initially relaxed expression tightened slightly upon hearing the news. She tried to keep her voice steady. "Sharon is coming over tonight, huh? Well, darling, that's lovely. But it would have been nice to know sooner. Don't you think?" she asked, struggling to hide her dissatisfaction. Sean nodded. She really wanted to come. Apparently, She wants to celebrate something special, but she didn't give any details. Mom always likes to keep secrets and surprises. It's part of what makes her special, and I think you'll like it too. He explained, trying to ease the situation. Soon, Sharon arrived with a bottle of wine and her ever-present camera hanging around her neck. Elizabeth greeted her with a forced smile, and Sean helped Sharon to a seat. The evening passed with light conversation about Sharon's recent photography adventures. Sean noticed Sharon's camera and, partly joking and partly curious, asked, "Mom, you always carry that camera around. Are you planning to capture some special moment?" Sharon's eyes sparkled as she smiled. "You never know when a special moment might happen, Sean. Like now, for instance." She stood up and took a photo of Sean and Elizabeth. After the camera's shutter clicked, the sound of the photo being printed followed. Sharon theatrically handed the photo to Elizabeth. "Keep this in your wallet, dear. As a memento of this wonderful time," she suggested with a smile, hiding the unspoken emotions behind it. Elizabeth accepted the photo with a forced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Of course, Sharon. Thank you," she replied with an effort to sound grateful while placing the photo into her wallet. Inside, Elizabeth thought, to want to remember this night forever, as if. Elizabeth's mind began to question the true intent behind Sharon's actions. She knew well that the relationship between these two women was anything but simple. Sean watched the interaction between the two most important women in his life, feeling a complex mix of emotions. He loved his mother, Sharon, and his wife, Elizabeth, but he could sense that the harmony between them was fragile. "I hope that one day, things might change," he thought, though he had no strong conviction. As the night wore on, more wine was poured, and the conversation continued with light topics and occasional laughter. Yet beneath the surface of this apparent ease, there was a swirl of tension and unresolved questions. Especially regarding the photograph now tucked away in Elizabeth's wallet. What seemed like an innocent gesture to Sharon was a reminder of potential rivalry for Elizabeth. It highlighted the complexities of family dynamics under the lavish roof of their home. As dinner drew to a close, Sharon fixed a sharp gaze on Elizabeth and Sean. "You two are cherishing each other, aren't you? Family is the most precious thing we have." Her voice carried a meaning beyond her words. Elizabeth sensed the underlying intent of Sharon's words and responded cautiously. "Of course, Sharon. We understand and are always grateful for having you here, always guiding us on what we should do." She responded with a smile, but it felt like a mask. Sean felt the rising tension and tried to ease the atmosphere. "Mom, Elizabeth means it. We have a strong family, thanks to you. And there's no better wife than Elizabeth. We're the most wonderful family, and we're expecting to grow with a new addition soon. As I mentioned, we're planning to have a baby." He made an effort to bridge the gap between the two women. Sharon stood up, packed away her camera, and prepared to leave. "I only wish the best for you both. Special moments need to be etched not only in photographs but also in our hearts." She said this while looking directly at Elizabeth and giving Sean a kiss as she said her goodbyes. As Sharon left, the tension in the house seemed to dissipate, leaving behind an awkward silence. Elizabeth cleared the table, and Sean reluctantly helped. The unspoken anxiety and emerging cracks in their relationship became all too clear.
As I sat at the small kitchen table on the other side of town, I gazed at the quiet of the house, where Elijah was peacefully asleep. I found myself reflecting on my journey at the company. Working for Sean had become one of the few pillars of stability in my life. But even with the paycheck I received from him, it felt like the bills just kept piling up. Every time I opened another envelope, it was like a reminder that the end of the month was fast approaching. I need to get a pay raise, I thought, the idea looping in my mind like a song I couldn't forget. but how should I ask for it? Sean had already done so much for me, covering Elijah's daycare costs and offering flexible work hours. Am I forgetting to show gratitude? I wrestled with these thoughts, torn between my deep appreciation for Sean and the undeniable reality of my financial struggles. I recalled the brief conversations and shared smiles amidst the daily chaos at the office. Sean's respect and kindness were not things to be taken for granted. He's a good person and a good boss. Maybe he'll understand. Holding on to hope, I resolved to take action. I knew I needed to have that conversation. Tomorrow, I'll talk to Sean. For Elijah's sake, I need to bring this up. My resolve was clear on my face. I began to think about how to approach the conversation, searching for the right words to convey my gratitude, my situation, and my needs without appearing rude or demanding. With no time to rest, the alarm clock rang, and a new day began. I quickly got ready, dressed Elijah, and took him to daycare. Everything was done in silence. After leaving Elijah, I carried a heavy heart as I headed to work. Arriving at the office, I set up my desk with my usual efficiency, arranging documents, pens, and keyboard, mentally preparing for the conversation with Sean. He arrived shortly, but his expression showed signs of weariness, reflecting a restless night. "Good morning, Allison," Sean greeted me. His usual steady tone brought me a familiar sense of reassurance. I returned Sean's greeting, noticing the shadow of worry on his face. At that moment, Sean did something unusual. He sat down in front of my desk, as if he needed to share a heavy burden. "Hey, Allison, last night's dinner was, well, tense," Sean started hesitantly. "Elizabeth and my mother Sharon came over unexpectedly. The two of them don't get along well. And I'm caught in the middle, feeling helpless." He looked at me as if he were seeking a safe harbor in the midst of a personal storm. I was taken aback by Sean's candor but listened carefully, wanting to offer him a comforting space where he could open up. "That sounds tough. I can imagine you love those two women more than anything in the world," I said with a voice full of empathy. Sean sighed deeply. "My mother, she has concerns about Elizabeth. She thinks Elizabeth's reasons for being with me might be wrong. But I love Elizabeth, and I want to believe we're together for love, not for any ulterior motives." Sean's explanation was laden with clear pain. I could sense the depth of Sean's internal struggle. "Have you talked about this with your mother? Maybe a simple conversation could resolve this situation faster than you think," I gently suggested, encouraging him to open up. "We've tried talking," he replied. "But it always ends up in arguments. Elizabeth feels like she's being criticized, which I understand. But all I want is for our family to come together. I'm not sure if I'm asking for the impossible or if fate is against me." Sean exposed his vulnerabilities, laying bare his weakness. I saw a side of Sean I'd never seen before, his fragility. Our conversation flowed naturally, revealing not only Sean's difficulties but also the trust and respect that had built up between us. I was moved by Sean's honesty and deeply felt the complexities of human relationships. "Sean, I truly believe your mother wants nothing more than your happiness. With time, Elizabeth and your mother might find common ground and realize how important they are to you." I said this with hopeful sincerity. "And remember, you need to continue being the bridge between them. If you stay patient, things will likely improve." Sean looked at me and gave a grateful smile. "Thank you, Allison. Your perspective always shows me things from a different angle. You make complex issues seem simpler." Sean acknowledged the wisdom and support I always provided him. As Sean stood up, preparing to face another day of challenges at work, I felt renewed strength from our conversation. Understanding Sean's personal struggles gave me a new perspective on him. It was about seeing the person behind the CEO title. Amid the flurry of documents and phone calls, both Sean and I continued to deepen our understanding of each other's lives while dealing with our respective battles. For me, the daunting task of asking for a raise was slightly less intimidating, knowing I had a genuine relationship with him. By mid-morning, Sean approached me with a serious expression, preparing to share something important. "Allison, there's something you need to know. I'll be away for a few days to take care of some business in the neighboring town. During that time, I'll leave the company matters in your hands. It will only be a day or two, so if needed either my mother or Elizabeth might reach out to you." Sean explained this with trust evident in his voice. I was surprised but nodded in understanding. "Of course, Sean. I'll handle everything. Have a good trip." My response carried a sense of responsibility. Sean expressed his gratitude and left before lunch, having informed Elizabeth and his mother of his sudden departure.
At that time, Sharon was making her way through town in a taxi, heading to Sean's house. She was going to retrieve a bag she had forgotten the night before. As Sharon neared the house, she spotted Elizabeth getting into an unfamiliar car. Driven by curiosity, and perhaps a deeper instinct, Sharon instructed the taxi driver to follow the car. The mysterious vehicle and the taxi arrived at an elegant restaurant in town. Elizabeth got out of the car with an unknown man. Without hesitation, Sharon got out of the taxi, camera in hand, and hid in a nearby bush, ready to capture what was about to unfold. "It's time to uncover this young woman's true nature," Sharon whispered as she crouched low. She couldn't help but wonder about the relationship between Elizabeth and the mysterious man. Was it personal, or was it related to work? "Elizabeth isn't working and is living off my son," Sharon thought, considering various possibilities. Although Sharon disliked Elizabeth's arrogance and calculating nature, she couldn't hide her astonishment at the scene before her. From her vantage point, clearly overlooking the restaurant's open-air seating, she witnessed an astonishing sight. Elizabeth and the man were not merely discussing business. There was undeniable intimacy between them. They laughed together, embraced, and their hug was long and warm. It was more than just a friendly gesture between colleagues. Sharon silently and accurately captured the moment through her camera lens. The sound of the camera shutter was a stark contrast to the warm gestures exchanged between the two. As she observed Elizabeth and the man, she saw them sit close, their shoulders touching, and their hands naturally and comfortably resting on the table. With each new display of affection, Sharon's unease grew. What does this mean? Her mind raced, contemplating the potential impact of these photos. She understood that she held evidence that could change family dynamics, but she hesitated to use this power, unsure of how to fully grasp the situation. When Elizabeth and the man finally said their goodbyes, exchanging another long embrace and a lingering smile, Sharon emerged from the bushes. She felt the weight of what she had witnessed pressing heavily on her heart. The photos still in her camera were silent witnesses to the affectionate encounter. Sharon stood on the sidewalk, lost in thought. The tenderness between Elizabeth and the mysterious man was undeniable, but it only complicated matters further. Should I tell Sean? Sharon pondered, clutching the camera as if it might reveal the answer. The decision of whether or not to reveal this event weighed heavily on her. It was a moral dilemma requiring both caution and compassion. While the photos might tell a story, they did not convey the emotions or circumstances behind the moment. Sharon knew that her actions could lead to irreversible consequences. Sighing thoughtfully, she decided to keep the photos for now and take time to consider the best course of action. She tucked the camera into her everyday bag, but at that moment, Elizabeth spotted Sharon from a safe distance. The camera was still visible inside the bag, indicating what had transpired. Elizabeth's heart raced, and the reality of her actions began to weigh heavily on her. "Sharon!" she called out. Confusion and fear tinged her voice with urgency. Sharon, startled, realized she had been spotted and tried to flee. "This is none of your business," she shouted over her shoulder, breathless as she ran away. Sharon began to run without a clear direction, only knowing she was heading toward the woods. Elizabeth tried to give chase, but the car sped past quickly, creating distance between them and causing her to miss the chance to safely cross the road. "Wait, Sharon. We need to talk about this. Don't show anything to Sean," Elizabeth shouted, feeling frustrated as she watched Sharon recede into the distance. Standing there, obstructed by traffic, Elizabeth realized she had few options left. She saw everything. She knows it all, and probably took pictures. Elizabeth thought, as the reality of her choices and potential consequences began to settle in. Why did she have to choose that spot when there are so many places to be? Watching Sharon disappear into the woods, Elizabeth understood the gravity of the situation. It was more than just being caught or facing a moral lesson. It was about the truth she had tried to conceal. "Sean will find out. And he will probably discard me," Elizabeth whispered, as anxiety grew within her. Now, the forest stretched out before her. Sharon and her hidden evidence had become a symbol of Elizabeth's secret. Elizabeth continued to think alone. "I have to find Sharon. I need to get that photo before it's too late." Elizabeth was determined, but she also knew the task would be difficult. She understood that her choices would have consequences and knew she needed to control the situation before it became completely unmanageable.
At that time, with Sean out of town, I had the chance to finish work a little earlier than usual. I quickly checked Sean's office to make sure everything was in order before leaving. Feeling a bit lighter with the early freedom, I got in my car, planning to pick up Elijah from daycare and enjoy the sunshine a little longer today. Today, at least, I can make my son happy, I thought to myself as I drove. I took Elijah to a park near the forest, a quiet place where he could burn off his boundless energy. While Elijah played on the equipment, I sat on a nearby bench, taking a moment to rest. My mind drifted, reflecting on recent events and the decisions I had made. Suddenly, a cry for help shattered the evening calm from deep within the forest. I jumped up, my heart racing at the urgency of the sound. "Elijah, stay here, and don't leave the park." "I'll be right back," I instructed him. Though my voice was firm, my heart was filled with unease. Without a second thought, I rushed into the forest to help whoever was in danger. As I moved, the crunching of branches and dry leaves underfoot echoed in the growing twilight. The cry grew clearer as I followed its direction. Finally, I reached a part of the forest and saw a woman lying on the ground, struggling to get up. I rushed to her, my breath mixing with the wind as I approached. The woman was older, her gray hair standing out even in the deepening shadows of the forest. I didn't recognize her immediately, but later learned she was Sean's mother, Sharon. "Are you all right? What happened?" "Don't worry, I'm here to help with anything you need," I said, extending a hand to help her up. My eyes reflected sympathy as I spoke. The woman's face showed a mix of pain and relief at being found. She took my hand, accepting the help to stand up. She began to explain why she was there. "I got lost trying to find my way back, twisted my ankle, and fell," she said in a trembling voice. I quickly checked her ankle and noticed the swelling. "We need to get out of here. Can you walk if I help you? It's not safe here, and my son is outside, so I need to keep an eye on him as well." I quickly got ready to help and asked her. The woman nodded, and with my support, she managed to stand up. I guided her carefully, retracing the path we had come from. With each step we took, I felt the weight of responsibility for ensuring her safety. My mind was still grappling with the coincidence of stumbling upon someone in need, right after I had taken Elijah to the park next to the forest. As we neared the forest exit, the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees and highlighting the gravity of the situation. I felt a growing sense of urgency to learn more about the woman once she was safe. It felt like a task I was surprisingly well prepared for, even though it had come out of nowhere. While I supported her, the woman began to explain what had happened to her. "I'm being chased," she said in a low, urgent voice. "I saw something I shouldn't have. It involves people close to me, including my son." She spoke carefully, avoiding names and revealing just enough to convey her distress. She seemed to be aware that neither of us knew much about the other, which made the situation even more intense. As we walked, she pulled a camera from her bag and handed it to me. "Please, I need you to do something very important for me." She handed me the camera with a sense of urgency. "Don't let anyone else see this. Take it to Sean Flores. He'll know what to do." Her instructions were clear, but I was confused. My heart raced at the mention of Sean's name. The woman was unaware of our connection. Before I could respond or ask about the contents of the photos, she hurriedly added, "I need to leave now. I have to deal with Elizabeth." With that, she entrusted me with the camera and her bag and left me standing alone. They were silent witnesses to secrets yet to be revealed. I was still processing the unexpected encounter when I opened the gallery on the camera with trembling hands. What I saw in the photos struck me with shock. They were images of my boss's wife, embracing an unfamiliar man in a way that was deeply troubling. Each photo was a blow, a violation of privacy that I could never have anticipated. And the thought of handing these images over to Sean was beyond my wildest imaginings. Emotions surged through me, a chaotic mix of fear, shame, and anger. The photos in my hands were a heavy burden, proof of betrayal. When Sharon mentioned Elizabeth's name, it only added more complexity and danger to the situation. I kept asking myself, what am I supposed to do? These photos have immense power. I don't know what's right in this situation. As I wrestled with the weight of the decision I had to make, the camera in my hands was not just evidence, but also a potential weapon that could destroy my boss's life. I was deeply aware of the moral dilemma I was facing. Should I protect myself, hide the photos, and keep them from being discovered? Or should I give the camera to Sean, reveal the act of betrayal, and see his reaction firsthand? Without having time to fully process my encounter with Sharon, I hurriedly tried to conceal the camera bag as I searched for Elijah. That small bag now felt like a crushing weight on my conscience. From a distance, Elizabeth recognized the bag as the one Sharon had been carrying. As I hurried towards the car, I noticed Elizabeth's intense gaze fixed on the bag as she ran toward me with a determined look. My heart pounded as I quickly grabbed Elijah with one arm and the bag with the other. I reached the car and almost jumped inside, urgently placing Elijah in the back seat. "I'm sorry, my sweet child. Just wait a moment," I whispered, trying to stay calm for both of us. Ignoring Elijah's confused cries, I started the car and drove off. In the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of Elizabeth closing in fast. I accelerated, fleeing the parking lot as if escaping from a predator. I knew I had to keep Elizabeth from seeing the photos. I was certain Elizabeth would destroy the evidence if she got hold of it. What do I do now? I kept asking myself, with reason struggling to be heard over the panic and Elijah's cries. As I drove home, I began to consider my options. The truth about Elizabeth's affair, now captured forever in Sharon's photos, had the potential to ruin both her and Sean's lives. I need to talk to Sean and show him these photos. The thought of this decision began to feel increasingly rational. Elijah, sensing the tension, continued to cry. The sobs filled the car with a mournful melody, reflecting the turmoil inside me. "It's going to be all right, Elijah. Mommy's here. I tried to comfort him, but my voice trembled. Reaching back to offer physical comfort, I kept my eyes glued to the road. I was piecing things together as I drove home. That woman must be Sharon, Sean's mother. She must have been following Elizabeth and documenting everything. Sharon always said Elizabeth wasn't right for him and that she was only after his money. It seems she might have been right. As we neared home, I carried Elijah and the bag inside, my heart pounding fiercely. I knew tonight would be a long one. With the storm looming, I started a marathon of worry and planning, trying to figure out how to face what was coming. After I put Elijah to bed, I sat beside him for a quiet moment, finding solace in his innocent presence, a temporary escape from the chaos around me. It will all be all right. I whispered this to both him and myself, though confidence still seemed just out of reach. In the dim light of the kitchen, I stared at the cold coffee beside the bag containing the camera, desperately trying to plan my next move. I need to show these photos to Sean. I murmured to myself, feeling the weight of this promise hanging in the air. But Sean wouldn't be back for another 2 days. The urgency of the situation pushed me to think quickly, but every option seemed fraught with risk. Then, the phone rang, shattering the night's silence like an alarm. My heart skipped a beat as I saw the unfamiliar number, never expecting to hear Elizabeth's voice on the other end. "Hand over that camera, Allison. This is none of your concern." Her demand came with a hidden threat. "Why do you have my number? We've never spoken before," I asked her, feeling fear start to grip me. "And I won't be returning anything. You've betrayed Sean's trust. He believes in me, unlike you." "Sean forgot his cell phone at home," Elizabeth replied dismissively. "And your number was prominently displayed on his phone, with a profile picture too. I immediately recognized you as the one with Sharon's camera. Isn't that interesting?" Elizabeth's voice came through the phone with a mechanical coldness, and I felt fear swelling inside me like a storm ready to consume me. I was paralyzed, unable to respond, and simply hung up the phone. I hoped Elizabeth was just bluffing, but desperation drove me to call Sean. I needed to hear his voice and find out if there was a solution to this mess. But once again, it was Elizabeth who answered. "So, you're trying to talk to Sean? Didn't I tell you I was telling the truth?" Her tone dripped with mocking satisfaction. "Let me be clear, Allison. If you don't return the camera, I will find you wherever you go. That includes tracking down your son too." The moment I heard those words, the phone slipped from my trembling hand and fell with a dull thud on the table. The threat against Elijah was unbearable. The gravity of my situation, the complexity of it, and the potential consequences of my actions all crashed down on me with full force. I have to protect Elijah. That thought started to shift my fear into determination. The idea that Elizabeth might act on her threat and harm my son drove me to act. I knew I had to do something. I had to find a way to prioritize Elijah's safety above all else. There are no easy solutions. I concluded that, solidifying my resolve. I had to think about protecting myself not just now, but in the long term too. The first step was securing Elijah's safety. Then I would face the consequences of my choices with Elizabeth. As dawn approached, I finally made a decision. I was willing to do anything to protect my son, but I also intended to inform Sean about Elizabeth. Elizabeth had started to reveal her criminal side through her threats. The camera hidden in the bag was secondary, the real battle had only just begun. I held my coffee cup and stared blankly at the sky. Next to me, Elijah quietly played with his toy car. How can I find Sean when I don't even know which city he's in? And what if Elizabeth finds me before I find him? I felt a tightening in my stomach as I thought about it. The camera in the bag felt like a ticking time bomb, ready to explode at any moment and shatter the peaceful life I shared with my son. The phone on the table vibrated, breaking the cafe's tranquility. I hesitated before answering, already bracing myself for Elizabeth's voice on the other end. Testing my patience, "Are you, Allison?" Elizabeth's voice came through immediately. "You'll regret it if that camera isn't in my hands by the end of today." I swallowed hard, trying desperately to keep my voice steady. "Elizabeth, this won't end well for either of us. Can't we talk this out? There's a child involved." I glanced at Elijah, who was playing innocently, oblivious to the looming danger. "Talk it out? That time is long gone. The moment you interfered with my business. Sean must never know, and he absolutely won't. And if you don't hand over that camera, well, let's just say, I hope you're prepared for the consequences of your actions." Elizabeth's veiled threats sent waves of panic crashing over me. She really means to go after Elijah. I can't allow that to happen. Despair surged through me as I realized the gravity of the situation. I hung up the phone, desperately searching for a solution. I have to find Sean. I need to tell him this directly. It's not about the hidden photos, it's something I must convey in person.
On the other side of town, Elizabeth returned to Sean's house, only to find Sharon there. It was an unexpected encounter, but Elizabeth decided to use it to her advantage. She didn't hide her intentions as she shut the door, trapping their fates within the house. "I'll stay here until Allison hands over the camera." Elizabeth's voice carried a calm threat. Sharon, surprised by the sudden turn of events, tried to maintain her composure. "You can't keep me locked up here, Elizabeth. That's madness. It's a crime. You should be ashamed of yourself." Sharon argued, searching for a way to escape the situation. Elizabeth began to pace the room, detailing her plans. She laid out everything she hoped to achieve in the end. "No one can stop me, Sharon. Not you, not Allison. Once I get that camera, everything will be solved." Sharon felt a surge of anger and despair as she listened to Elizabeth's malevolent scheme. "How can you be so selfish? Using my son and dating another man. You don't love Sean, you just want his money." Sharon challenged her. With each word Elizabeth spoke, Sharon's anger grew. Their argument escalated, and accusations flew between them. Elizabeth's cold gaze showed no sign of regret or doubt. "I'll do whatever it takes to protect what's mine." Her voice was sharp as a blade. Sharon searched for a way out from Elizabeth's words and attitude. "I need to find a way to alert Allison and Sean. They need to know the truth." Sharon thought that way, pretending to agree with some of Elizabeth's points to buy time. "This won't end here," Sharon whispered, not to Elizabeth but to herself. "I'll find a way to tell Sean." Elizabeth's eerie laughter echoed through the room. "Go ahead, try. Who do you think will be believed? An old woman with a camera that's about to be destroyed, or Sean's devoted wife? Let's see who wins." Despite Elizabeth's threats, Sharon felt a glimmer of hope. Elizabeth's shocking confessions fueled Sharon's determination to fight. "No matter what you say, Elizabeth, the truth will come out eventually. I'll tell Sean everything." Elizabeth, trapped in her own arrogance, failed to see that every word she uttered was strengthening Sharon's resolve. As Sharon pondered her next move, it became clear that Elizabeth was underestimating her determination and cunning.
As night deepened and silence settled over the house, I felt my phone vibrate, piercing the quiet like a sudden storm. My heart skipped a beat as I glanced at the unfamiliar number on the screen. With trembling hands, I answered the call, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hello?" Despite the anxiety gripping me, my voice came out stronger than I felt. On the other end, Elizabeth's cold, calculated tone sent shivers down my spine. I'm with Sharon right now. She wants to leave but can't. Believe me, she wants to get out. Elizabeth didn't waste words, her voice sharp and unwavering. Until I get what I want, which is the camera, she won't be freed. My heart raced as guilt and fear overwhelmed me, realizing Sharon was caught in this nightmare. Yet, I fought to keep my voice firm. Elizabeth, don't hurt her. You know that's a crime, right? I tried to get reassurance about Sharon's safety, but Elizabeth's response was chilling. She laughed in a way that made my skin crawl. For now, she's safe. But if you don't do as I say, who knows what might happen? Since we're at Sean's house, come alone and don't call the police. Otherwise, well, you can guess the rest. After hanging up, I felt trapped in a nightmare. The fear for Sharon's safety mixed with my anger at Elizabeth, pushing me to act swiftly. In the midst of this despair, one thought emerged. I connected the camera to my phone, using the direct transfer technology to send the photos. The images flowed onto the screen, and now, crucial evidence was saved on my phone. Each file became definitive proof of Elizabeth's actions. Once I confirmed the photos were securely stored, I headed to Sean's house with the camera. My heart pounded fiercely, and everything felt like a whirlwind. On the way, I called the police. Hello, is this the police? Please come to 7 Maple Street. A woman is being held against her will by a fraudster. The police accepted the report. When I arrived at the house, I saw Elizabeth waiting for me, her face lit up with a victorious grin. Hand over the camera, she demanded, her voice betraying an edge of desperation she couldn't quite hide. I kept my outward calm as I handed the camera to Elizabeth. She quickly destroyed it, believing she had erased all the evidence. Sharon was freed, her face a mix of confusion and relief as she exchanged glances with me. Her eyes conveyed emotions that words could not. Elizabeth was reveling in her supposed victory. Now you see that nothing can stop me. Sean loves me. He will continue to love me, always. It's only natural. Just then, Sean unexpectedly returned early from his trip, opening the large door to the house and walking inside. Seeing the three of us there, he was puzzled and worried about why his secretary and mother were with Elizabeth so late at night. Elizabeth greeted Sean as if nothing was amiss, but the tension in the air was palpable. I mustered all my courage and interrupted their reunion. Sean, I have something to show you. I spoke firmly, pulling out my phone and opening the photo app, handing it to him. The photos spoke volumes beyond words. Each picture revealed the truths Elizabeth had desperately tried to conceal. Sean stared at the photos on my phone, and a heavy silence fell over the room. The only sound was our collective breathing as Sean's confused expression turned to shock. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the overwhelming evidence. As Elizabeth began to make excuses, Sharon cut her off, speaking with resolve and revealing more. Sean, this woman has confessed to embezzling company funds, lying, and having an affair, all behind your back. Before Elizabeth could respond, Sharon made her final move. She ran out of the house, trying to escape the consequences of her actions, only to freeze at the sight of the police waiting outside. Watching this unfold, I couldn't help but smile at the sight of Elizabeth's defeated expression. Elizabeth, did you really think you could escape? I said with a sweet sense of revenge in my voice. Sean was visibly shocked by the truth, his face a mix of disgust and profound disappointment as he looked at Elizabeth. I can't stand it anymore. I can't endure being deceived so blatantly, especially after my mother warned me, time and again. Let's end this now. Sean declared that as he fixed his gaze directly on Elizabeth. His words marked the end of their relationship, a culmination of betrayal and lies. As Elizabeth was taken away by the police, Sean, Sharon, and I spent a quiet moment together. We were bound together by this extraordinary situation, looking ahead to the start of a new chapter. It was not just the end of a relationship but also a promise of truth and rebuilding. Sean, feeling unwell, requested some time to himself, and we each went home that day. The next day, the atmosphere in Sean's company felt noticeably lighter, though the weight of recent events was still present. Sean, with a look of gratitude and relief, called me to his office. "Allison, I can't thank you enough. I'm deeply grateful for everything you've done." Sean began, his voice laden with sincere appreciation. "You not only managed the company while I was away but also saved my mother. So, I've decided to give you a raise and a bonus." Sean's words conveyed his gratitude, filling my heart with deep joy. I was at a loss for words, overwhelmed with surprise and emotion, unable to hide my gratitude. "Sean, I don't know what to say," I responded with a voice trembling with emotion. Without thinking, I stood up and hugged him. It was a natural expression of thanks. Sean, moved by the moment, embraced me in return. After several days, a calm smile finally appeared on his face. Once the moment of gratitude passed, I left Sean's office feeling lighter and more valued than ever. I knew that difficult days were behind us, and a new chapter was beginning for both Sean and me. I can now pay for the daycare with peace of mind and provide a better life for my son.
At that time, Elizabeth was facing the consequences of her actions, imprisoned and unable to manipulate the situation to her advantage, harboring a bitter and resentful attitude. Everyone, watch closely. I'll make you all regret this. Elizabeth refused to accept reality and continued to think this way. Even in defeat, she was determined to hold on to her malice. Meanwhile, Sharon felt a sense of relief from the resolution of the events and was satisfied knowing that the truth would surely come to light. She was content with having played a role in exposing the lies surrounding her family. She knew the coming days would be calm, like after a storm had passed. Freed from the web of deceit Elizabeth had spun, Sean was grateful for Allison and Sharon's honesty and courage. He resolved to overcome adversity and build a better future, both personally and professionally. And so, each of them moved forward. They were shaped by the experiences they had endured. Allison now felt more valued in her work and was optimistic about future possibilities with newfound confidence. Sean, supported by the women who had shown loyalty and strength in his life, focused on repairing the damage and fostering an environment based on trust and respect. And Elizabeth remained as a symbol of the dark lesson that ultimately, the truth prevails. And so, another story came to an end. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us deliver stories of overcoming challenges almost every day. Don't forget to check out the videos displayed on the screen. Thank you for your support, and we look forward to seeing you in the next exciting story.